Hey y'all, hey, we are back for another review of Sisters. We're on season 9, episode 18, entitled Diamonds Are Forever. Last week Aaron was proposing to Karen, and of course we're going to get an answer in this episode. Yeah, I'm getting ready to go to the gym, so we're just trying to get this video out. Bear with me. Alright, so Aaron has proposed to Karen, and we're waiting for her answer, and of course we get a relationship montage, how they met, blah, 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 whoop-de-whoop. We see all that in the beginning, and she eventually just says yes. And she's like, well, how did you pick out such a nice ring? And he tried to take credit for it, but he did come out and admit, like, hey, your mom helped me pick out the ring. You know, she gave some input after I asked her for her blessing. So seems that mama's on task, mama agrees, and all is well. All right, so also at the end of the last episode, we saw where Damani was telling Sabrina that she needs to get rid of his donation to her frozen embryos, and so we're going to pick that back up in this episode as well. She's taken aback by Damani asking her to get rid of the embryos, and he says that him and his ex are back together and they're getting married, and she's not going to marry him if the embryos remain. Not only that, he doesn't want to be a deadbeat. He doesn't want to have children out there that he does not know. Now, you would assume that this is something you thought about prior to making the donation, but he's giving more of, let's appease this woman because this is my fiance, this is my woman now, and I got to go undo all the stuff I did before we got back together. That's what it's really giving. Either way, so after he proposed, for whatever reason, he felt like he needed to tell the fiance about Sabrina and the embryos. And she tells him, like, listen, you signed an agreement. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Which is a little bit contradictory to what she's going to say later on in the episode, but we'll talk about it when we get there. And he's like, I know that there's an agreement, which is why I'm coming to you humbly to ask, because I don't want, like you said, random kids out there. And Sabrina's not having none of it. She's like, sir, you gave me this donation fair and square. It is what it is. All right. So Sabrina is talking to Maurice and telling him about everything that's happening with the embryos and everything else. And then this is where the contradiction comes in to me. She tells him that they signed a verbal agreement. They gave a verbal agreement about the donation. And, you know, from what I can gather is he said he was going to make the donation. They had a conversation. I can't remember them talking about it on the show. He's going to make a donation. You know, he wants to donate his little swimmers to the cause. And, I don't know. I think he had an understanding that he would not be in his kids' lives to begin with. He was just there to make a donation, probably get paid because, you know, sperm banks take donations and they pay people. I don't know how that works out in this instance. Either way, and we know that it's verbal, so of course that's going to come back to bite her in the ass, and we're going to have to get involved. And Maurice told her, like, hey, you should have had Andy draw up an actual contract so that we wouldn't have to deal with this. However, she didn't, so now we have to deal with something else. So now she's kind of in between, like a rock and a hard place again. And now she's starting to feel like the $20K she spent on her IVF treatments and this whole process may have all been for naught. So whatever. And then Paige is eavesdropping, and she comes in and tells them, like, I also want to remind y'all that Georgia law won't even let you get rid of them because Georgia is pro-life, and that includes embryos that have not been fertilized yet or it's not coming to term. That's also a part of the pro-life initiative. So you can't just, for lack of a better, you can't just discard this whole process and start over. You simply can't, because Georgia is probably going to try to lock your ass up. So again, Sabrina's in between a rock and an even harder place. So yeah. Okay. Andy's mama, she shows up to the office unannounced yet again, trying to bribe Andy with some kind of pecan candy that she loves. However, we know that the mama is there to just unleash her southern black woman, you know, shade onto Andy about her life. We don't even get past, hey, ma, how you doing? How you peeping them? How did you sleep last night? We didn't get past none of that. Mama goes into the tirade to ask her why she not married, why she giving up the goodies to this man that ain't her husband, why she don't go to church. Just reading her rights and just, again, just too deeply into another grown person's business, if you were to ask me. But anyway, and Andy's like, well, you know, basically, like, you judgy. You're very judgy, ain't you? She's like, no, it ain't judgment. I just want to be able to brag, brag to my friends or be able to brag about my wife, brag about my daughter, Andy, the wife and the mother, and as opposed to just some lawyer that's getting people off of divorce, in divorce settlements and blah, 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 blah. And that really pissed me off because you just feel like her worth is tied to being a wife and a mother. I got my feelings about that. I'm not going to get on the soapbox about it, but girl, shut the hell up. The lady is a partner. She's a partner at a law firm, which means she's had to prove herself over and over again to these white men. And you think her ultimate goal in life is wife or mother. That's her ultimate success. Ma'am, please. Either way, she goes on to ask Andy if she's on birth control and if she even wants kids. Like, again, Andy, you can tell Andy is uncomfortable, but you're going to keep going until you get what you want out of the conversation. Cool. And Andy tells her, no, not really. Like, I don't even like kids like that. Like, what are you talking about? And so now that takes her back and she's clutching her pearls and child, she's probably going on to meet her maker at this point. She's taken aback at the fact that Andy would even say that she was not interested in having children. Child, I'm telling you, it's just sometimes y'all really get on people's nerves with that. Worried about when they having kids, why they having kids, why they don't. You don't know nobody's situation, struggle, or desires. Shut up about it and leave people alone. All right. Mr. Keys and Zach, they meet up to have a little chit chat, and he's constantly reminding Zach of how much he reminds him of his dad, Gold. I guess they called him Gold because he always had on, gold jewelry everywhere, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to insert here that Mr. Keys, you're starting to aggravate me. You can see that this man becomes visibly and emotionally unsteady when you remind him of how much of his dad you see in him, even though the dad was a deadbeat and didn't have time for him. Maybe he just didn't want to deal with the mom. We know the mom had the drug issues. Either way, let's just stop reminding him of who his dad was to you, because you have great stories about his dad and he does not. So it's just going to continue to annoy him, and that's going to affect y'all potential friendship if that's what happens. So just leave it alone. Anyway, he tells Zach that everybody calls him Gold because he would always wear a lot of jewelry. And Zach is like, oh, so he had all this money and all this, and he couldn't do anything for his son. He's like, no, not because he had a bunch of money to blow, but because he would steal it from the white folks he would work for. Okay, so Zach again reminds him, like, yeah, I ain't seen him since I was a kid, so I don't really care. He's still trying to reiterate the good qualities about Goldie to, I'm calling him Goldie because Gold just don't sound right. Goldie to Zach, and Zach is like, listen, I only know him as a deadbeat. Like, all this reminiscing is cool and all, but I only know him to be a deadbeat, so that is what he will be to me. And then Zach asks Mr. Key, like, if he was such good friends, why y'all ain't been in touch in years? Like, what's that about? And Mr. Key tells Zach that he hadn't spoke to Goldie in years because it got heated between them. It got heated between them because Mr. Keys was trying to tell Goldie, like, hey, you need to be present in your son's life. Like, you need to, be a better person. You got a kid to live for, all this other, I don't know, all this other stuff that he was on his soapbox about. I guess things got heated by way of him trying to make him Goldie should be in Zach's life. It got bad and they never spoke again up until this point. So, yeah. And Zach only wants to know why his dad never reached out to him. And unfortunately, Mr. Keys, for as good as for as well as he knew Goldie back in the day, he doesn't really have any answers for him. But he does hope, like, hey, I know I don't have the answers, but I'm just hoping that I can just remain friends. We can just be friends and develop our own relationship. Sure. And then he kind of advises Zach to kind of leave his dad where he is and just move on with his life. And maybe that is some of the parental closure that Zach's going to need to move forward. I mean, there is kind of closure on the Satima franchise because I think his mom passed away. I'm not sure if these episodes line up. Haven't been able to figure that out. But his mom did pass away in the Satima series. So maybe that is also a little bit of closure when it comes to, like, that yearning for some kind of parent. I don't know. We'll see. All right, so Karen goes to the law office and I think she goes to see Andy about something, but Fatima's already there. And Fatima sees, like, girl, you just glowing, like, what's up? And so she tells Fatima about the engagement that happened last night. And she also goes ahead and tells Fatima that they're moving to Seattle. And Fatima, like everybody other than the sister girl group, is much more happy for her. Everything is good. And so we see the ring and, all the girl talk that surrounding it. All right, so they switch subjects, and Andy finally shows up to the meeting, and she asked her to get the. Okay, all right. So it seems as if Andy called Karen down there to ask her what she's about to ask her next. She asked. Andy asked Karen, "Hey, we need the women from the support group to come down to the office today," and she's like, "This is quick. Like, to get them down here today is a lot, and I don't really know, so I have to see." I have to make some calls and see what happens. But she does think that having the ladies come in and kind of tell their story to Benson is going to convince him to help her along the way with her case with Dr. Cruz. I'm just going to go ahead and put my 2 cents in here and say it's not. It's really not. It doesn't really matter how much evidence. You already had paper evidence from like nurses and stuff to present to Benson, and it was not enough. Even looking at these black women in the face that have lost their children and almost lost their lives, it ain't gonna do nothing for Benson, child. He's with his ally, and that's just how it's gonna be. So you're wasting everybody's time, but you're also probably giving these women a false sense of hope. But we're just gonna go through to get through the episode. All right. We see Danny. Danny is dumping everything on her therapist, Lucretia. You know, everything about Tony, the job. Potentially the job's going bankrupt, so she might not have a job, blah, 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 blah. And the lady, Lucretia, the therapist, is realizing that Danny might be having a cortisol imbalance as far as like the sweats, that the heat, I don't know, the surges of heat that's going through her body, and her hormonal imbalance, and maybe like her lashing out, like all of these different things are probably indicating a cortisol imbalance. Something that's very common for women, black women in general. Easy enough fix. She just advises her to go to her doctor's appointment. Go to her primary doctor, make an appointment to get a official confirmation, which will probably include like a course of meds, and maybe we can get her more leveled out. So helpful, to say the least. All right. So the ladies from the support group are down there talking to Andy down at the law office. They're all kind of doing this little quick powwow before they go in to see Benson. And they appear to be relieved that she might be able to help him. Not that she can or can't, but just the hope of her potentially being able to help them is kind of, waking everybody's spirits up. Everybody's getting a little bit more hopeful. And many of them tell her, like, yeah, we didn't even pursue anything before because we couldn't afford to help. So we're glad that you are willing to fight on our behalf, and hopefully this is free or pro bono work. Hopefully. And that is one of the sad parts about it. Dr. Cruz probably knows that these people are from impoverished neighborhoods, and there's no lawsuit that would have come up. It might have been hard for them to fight against Dr. Cruz and I'm sure $1 billion industry, being the hospital, other doctors, and his allies. Some of his allies are lawyers. Like they would have been going up against a massive machine. So it does kind of take the wind out of your sails and make you not want to fight the good fight. So everybody's kind of hoping Andy can help. In the midst of this, sitting in the lobby just having a conversation, we see Dr. Cruz scrolling in with his briefcase and his little funky, ugly face, showing up for a meeting with Hayden. He has a meeting with Hayden. I think Benson has Hayden working with Dr. Cruz, so that's just going to be aggravating. Either way, and then he sees the women, and everybody's kind of shocked, and everybody's looking at Andy like, the hell is he doing here? So I'm sure we'll learn about that in next week's episode, what he got going on. He's probably there to get ahead of the lawsuit. What I'm willing to bet is Benson said something to him about Andy potentially suing him, and he's trying to get his ducks in a row. I wouldn't expect nothing else from the people. All right. So we see Damani. Damani comes down to the bank to further try and convince Sabrina to get rid of the embryos, and she reminds him, like, listen, the law has my hands tied as well. Even if I wanted to, legally I cannot. Georgia's a pro-life state. Oh well, and he's trying to downplay the embryos to, they're just specimen. They're not alive. Well, the state of Georgia and the pro-life people say they are. So ain't nothing I can do. And his suggestion is that she ships them to another state that is not so pro-life, so that she can get them out of there, unthaw their ass out and get them out of there. And she's like, Damani, I'm not doing it. Like, these are my embryos, my money, my sacrifice. I ain't doing it. And then his fiance, don't have a name just yet, she comes rolling in with the attitude like, oh, you Sabrina? Oh, you Sabrina that won't get rid of the embryos? And she's like, I am, and what to do, you pal. And the fiance tells her, like, listen, you don't even want to keep these embryos because you don't want to just be a stereotype, just a baby mama on food stamp. Like, you don't want that for your life. Let's make this easy. And Sabrina, again, is like, no, ma'am, I'm not getting rid of my embryos. That just is what it is. So the fiance tells her, like, we'll have our day in court. So now we're going to have to deal with this. But before we deal with the court aspect that's going to come up, we see Rich rolling in, of course, in the middle of this back and forth with some flowers. And, of course, him and Damani and Sabrina and the fiance lady are going to get into this pushing match in next week's episode. So, yeah. It's just one thing after another. It just, once one thing is squared away, something else pops up. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't even have anything else to say. That's been the episode. Let me know what y'all think about it in the comments, and we'll talk about it there. In the meantime, like, comment, share, subscribe, or whatever it is that you feel like doing, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.